As one of the world's largest economies and contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, America plays a crucial role in the fight against climate change. However, its actions, policies, and commitments continue to spark debate. These questions highlight key areas of concern regarding America's role in addressing this global challenge. 1. Is America doing enough to reduce carbon emissions? Despite efforts to curb emissions, the US remains one of the top carbon emitters. Are current policies and practices sufficient to meet global climate goals, or is more drastic action needed? 2. Should America be held more accountable for historical emissions? As a significant contributor to historical emissions, should the US take greater responsibility for the environmental damage caused by industrialization, and how can this accountability translate into action? 3. How does America's withdrawal and re-entry into climate agreements affect global progress? The US withdrawal from the Paris Agreement in 2017 and its re-entry in 2021 raised questions about its commitment to global climate cooperation. How does this inconsistency impact international trust and collective action? 4. Is the transition to renewable energy happening fast enough? While renewable energy use is growing, fossil fuels still dominate America's energy landscape. How can the transition to solar, wind, and other clean energy sources be accelerated without causing economic disruption? 5. What role does the private sector play in combating climate change? Major corporations are pledging to achieve net zero emissions, but critics argue that these commitments often lack transparency. Is the private sector doing enough, or is stronger government regulation necessary? 6. How are climate policies impacting rural and industrial communities? Shifting away from coal and other traditional industries can create economic challenges for certain regions. How can the government ensure a just transition for workers and communities most affected by these changes? 7. Is America investing enough in climate resilience? With rising sea levels, wildfires, and extreme weather events, climate adaptation is increasingly important. Are federal and state governments allocating sufficient resources to protect vulnerable communities and infrastructure? 8. How does America's climate action compare to other nations? Some argue that countries like China and India should bear more responsibility, while others emphasize the US's leadership role. Is America leading by example, or lagging behind in its climate commitments? 9. What role do political divides play in shaping climate policy? Partisan disagreements often hinder progress on environmental legislation. How can policymakers bridge these divides to create effective, long-term solutions to combat climate change? 10. Can America balance economic growth with climate goals? Critics of aggressive climate policies argue that they could harm the economy. How can the US balance economic growth, job creation, and environmental sustainability without compromising any of these priorities? These questions highlight the complexities of America's role in addressing climate change. By exploring them, the nation can better navigate its path toward a more sustainable and equitable future.